Hey guys, tonight we are stepping back in time, not into the roar of a battlefield or the gilded halls of a king, but into the quiet, lonely rooms of a little girl who would one day become the conscience of a nation. We're exploring the life of Eleanor Roosevelt, but we're starting where she did in the shadows of a grand New York society that never quite knew what to make of her. You're a child of immense privilege, born into a world of Astors and Vanderbilts, yet you feel like an outsider looking in. The gaslights hum softly, casting long, dancing shadows down the hallways of a house that feels more like a museum than a home. It's a world of strict rules, whispered secrets, and a deep, aching loneliness. Honestly, with the emotional chill in the air and the sheer weight of expectation, you probably won't survive this childhood with your spirit intact, but that's where our story begins. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's a small click for you, but it makes a huge difference for the channel. And while you're at it, I'd love to see where and when you're listening from. Go ahead and post your city and the local time in the comments. It's always a quiet thrill to see how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you are aware of is the silence. It's a heavy, oppressive quiet that seems to soak into the velvet curtains and the dark, polished wood of the furniture. You are a small child in a cavernous New York City townhouse, a little ghost haunting rooms filled with the ghosts of your powerful ancestors. You are Anna Eleanor Roosevelt, born into one of America's most prominent families. But you don't feel powerful. You feel awkward. Your movements are clumsy. Your chin recedes a little too much for your mother's liking, and your teeth are prominent. You are serious, grave, and thoughtful in a world that values sparkle and frivolity in its little girls. Your mother, Anna Hall Roosevelt, is a celebrated beauty, a woman who glides through ballrooms like a swan. When she looks at you, her tall, gangly, and somber daughter, you see a flicker of disappointment in her eyes. It's not malice, not exactly. It's more like a quiet confusion, as if she's wondering how she produced such a plain and serious creature. She calls you Granny, and it's not a term of endearment. It's a label that sticks, a constant reminder that you are somehow old before your time, that you lack the easy charm she possesses. You spend your days in starched dresses so stiff you could probably stand them up in a corner by themselves, feeling the scratchy lace at your neck like a gentle, persistent punishment for not being prettier, for not being more vivacious. Fun seems to be an invention for other families, a rumor you overhear but never experience firsthand. Then, the quiet of the house deepens. Your mother, so beautiful and distant, succumbs to diphtheria. You are only 8. The loss is a strange, hollow ache. It's hard to miss the warmth of a sun that never really shone on you. But the house is even colder now, the silence more profound. You are sent to live with your maternal grandmother, Mary Ludlow Hall, in her mansion on the Hudson River. If your childhood home was emotionally chilly, this new one is a veritable icebox. Your grandmother is a formidable matriarch, presiding over a household steeped in rigid discipline and a gloomy, almost theatrical sorrow. You half expect a ghost to emerge from the heavy draperies and offer you a cup of weak tea. And frankly, you might accept, just for the company. Your only real source of light is your father, Eliot. He is charming, handsome, and everything your mother's world adored. He is also Franklin Roosevelt's uncle, a fact that will become monumentally important later on. When he is with you, the world explodes into color. He calls you his little Nell and spins tales of adventure, promising to take you on grand journeys. He is your hero, your entire world, but he is a troubled hero. He struggles with alcoholism and is often away, banished by the family to seek cures that never seem to work. His letters, full of love and grand, impossible promises, are your most treasured possessions. They are proof that someone, somewhere, loves you unconditionally, but he never comes back for good. When you are just 10, he dies after a fall. His long battle with his demons finally over. The light goes out. The loss is not a hollow ache this time. It is a shattering blow that breaks your world into a million pieces. Biographers still debate the precise emotional impact of his adoration and subsequent absence. Some argue his tragic, romantic image gave you a lifelong ideal of what love should be, while others contend that the broken promises left you with a deep-seated fear of abandonment that would shape all your future relationships. Whatever the academic conclusion, for you, the child, it is simple. The one person who saw you, truly saw you, is gone. Now, your loneliness is absolute. You are an orphan, a plain, serious little girl in a world that doesn't value seriousness in girls. You are raised by a grandmother who believes children should be seen and not heard, and even then, only sparingly. You trudge through your days, your only companions the books you devour and the imaginary worlds you create. It's in these quiet, lonely years that something begins to germinate. You look at the servants in your grandmother's house, at the farmers working the fields, and you see them. You notice their fatigue, their worn hands, their quiet struggles. Having known such profound emotional poverty yourself, you begin to recognize poverty of a different kind in others, a seed of empathy, born in the cold, dark soil of your own sorrow, begins to sprout. You don't know it yet, but this capacity to feel the pain of others, to see the unseen and hear the unheard, will become the source of your greatest strength. It will become your gift to a world that desperately needs it. That seed of empathy needs light and air, a place to grow beyond the suffocating confines of your grandmother's house. Your salvation comes in the form of a finishing school, an unlikely place for a revolution to begin. You are sent to Allenswood Academy, just outside London, and for the first time, you are not just Granny or poor little Eleanor. The headmistress, Marie Souvestre, a charismatic and fiercely intelligent woman, sees past your shyness. She sees your mind, your curiosity, your deep well of compassion. Under her mentorship, you blossom. You learn to debate, to think critically about the world, to speak your mind with a confidence that feels foreign and exhilarating. For the first time, someone is nurturing your intellect, not just polishing your social graces. You travel with her through Europe, your eyes opening to art, culture, and the vast, complex tapestry of human society. You are finally becoming yourself. When you return to New York at 18 to make your society debut, you are a different woman. You are still tall, still shy, but there is a quiet strength in you now, a fire in your mind that a discerning eye might notice, and a discerning eye does notice. He is your fifth cousin, once removed, a young man with a name that echoes your own Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He is everything you are not effortlessly charming, buoyant with confidence, and possessed of a smile that could disarm armies. He attends Harvard. He is handsome. He is the center of every room he enters. You find yourself seated next to him at a dinner, and later, you dance. He seems drawn to your quiet intelligence, your surprising depth. This courtship isn't a whirlwind of public romance. It's a series of gentle, almost secret meetings, a shared conversation on a train, a quiet walk. It's a courtship that unfolds in the margins, away from the loud, glittering spectacle of New York society. It's less love's young dream, and more a series of polite, supervised interviews for a lifelong partnership. He is utterly captivated. While other girls offer practiced witticisms, you offer genuine opinions. You challenge him. You make him think. And soon, he proposes. This is a moment of profound, terrifying joy. Someone has chosen you. The handsome, popular, confident Franklin wants to marry you. The plain, serious Eleanor. Of course, there's a small wrinkle in this fairy tale, a wrinkle named Sarah Delano Roosevelt, Franklin's mother. She is a matriarch in the grandest sense of the word, a woman who could probably curdle milk with a stern glance, and who believes, with every fiber of her being, that no one is good enough for her precious son. She is horrified by the engagement. She finds you plain, unsophisticated, and worries your somber nature will be an anchor on her son's soaring ambition. She does everything in her power to stop the marriage, even taking Franklin on a long cruise, hoping he'll forget you. He doesn't. His persistence is a balm to your old wounds. Historians remain divided on the primary motivation behind Franklin's proposal. Was it a calculated, strategic move to unite the two powerful branches of the Roosevelt family? Was it a deep, abiding love for the brilliant, compassionate mind he saw in you? Or was it the simple, youthful infatuation of a man who found in your quiet authenticity a refreshing escape from the shallow debutantes he was expected to court? For you. It doesn't matter. He chose you. He fought for you. And on St. Patrick's Day, in 1905, you are married. Your uncle, the sitting President of the United States, Theodore Roosevelt, is there to give you away. He is such a magnetic force that when the ceremony is over, the crowds and reporters flock to him, leaving you and your new husband standing alone. It's a fitting, if slightly comical, omen for a marriage that will often be lived in the shadow of grand political forces. That little detail about being fifth cousins once removed just adds a layer of complexity, something that probably makes for a slightly awkward Thanksgiving dinner conversation down the line. The early years of your marriage are not the blissful dream you might have hoped for. Sarah's defeat was only temporary. She buys you a house right next to hers and installs connecting doors. She furnishes it. She hires the staff. She runs your household as if it were an extension of her own. When your children are born, 6 of them in 10 years, it is Grandma Sarah who takes charge, contradicting your motherly instincts, spoiling them, and quietly underlining your perceived incompetence at every turn. You feel like a guest in your own home, a visitor in your own life. Franklin, busy with his burgeoning political career in the New York State Senate, is often absent, and when he is home, he seems oblivious to your quiet struggle, unable or unwilling to stand up to his formidable mother. The old feelings of being an outsider, of being inadequate, creep back in. The silence of your childhood home is replaced by the suffocating presence of a mother-in-law who holds all the power. You are a Roosevelt now, but you have never felt less like yourself. You are a wife and a mother, but you feel adrift, searching for a role that is truly your own in this complex, gilded cage. The gilded cage of your marriage, already feeling so confining, is about to have its bars rattled, not by your mother-in-law, but by a discovery of your own. The year is 1918. The Great War is ending, and Franklin, serving as Assistant Secretary of the Navy, returns from a trip to Europe. You are helping him unpack his luggage, a simple domestic task, and there, tucked away in a suitcase, you find them a packet of letters. They are not from a political colleague or a naval officer. They are from Lucy Mercer, your own social secretary, a woman you had hired and trusted. They are love letters. It's amazing what you can find in a suitcase. Usually, it's just a forgotten souvenir or a desperate need to do laundry, not the complete implosion of your marriage. The discovery is a quiet cataclysm. The words on the page confirm a betrayal that is both profound and deeply personal. The man whose love had been your rescue from a lonely childhood, the man who had fought his mother to marry you, had sought love and affection elsewhere. The old wound, the one left by your father's broken promises and tragic absence, is torn open again. The world, for a moment, stops. Everything you thought you had built, a family, a partnership, a life, feels like a fragile illusion. You offer him a divorce. In your mind, the marriage is over, but it isn't that simple. Divorce for a man in public life, a rising star in the Democratic Party, would be a career-ending scandal. And then there is Sarah. For once, you and your mother-in-law are in agreement, though for different reasons. She will not tolerate the stain of divorce on the family name and threatens to cut Franklin off financially if he agrees to it. A new arrangement is forged in the crucible of this heartbreak. The marriage will continue, but as a political partnership. The intimacy, the trust, the private bond that is gone forever. You will remain Mr. and Mrs. Roosevelt, but you, Eleanor, will begin to build a life of your own, separate from his. Just as you are navigating this new, icy emotional landscape, a different kind of crisis strikes, one that will change everything yet again. It's the summer of 1921. You are at your beloved summer home on Campobello Island, off the coast of Maine. The air is thick with the scent of salt and pine. The days filled with the laughter of your children and the familiar joy of sailing on the cold, gray water. One afternoon, Franklin, ever the vigorous outdoorsman, returns from a day of activity feeling unusually tired. He has a chill. That evening, he goes to bed early. By the next morning, his legs feel weak. Within days, he is burning with fever, his body racked with pain. And then, the terrifying reality sets in. He cannot move his legs. He is paralyzed from the waist down. The initial diagnoses are wild guesses, the 1920s medical version of asking if you've tried turning it off and on again. But the eventual conclusion is poliomyelitis. In this moment of terror and confusion, something in you shifts. As doctors dither and family members panic, you become a fortress of resolve. You are the one who learns to catheterize him, to move his useless limbs to prevent atrophy, to manage his bed sores. You are his nurse, his caretaker, his shield against the world's pity and his own despair. Sarah, of course, descends upon Campobello with a plan. She intends to take her broken son back to the family seat at Hyde Park, where he can live out his days as a comfortable, respectable invalid, shielded from the world. It's a plan that sounds less like recovery and more like a life sentence of crushing boredom. And here, You fight your first great public battle, though it takes place within the confines of your family. You flatly refuse Sarah's plan. You ally yourself with Franklin's political strategist, Lewis Howe, who believes Franklin can and must have a future. You understand that for a man like Franklin, to be retired from the world would be a death of the spirit far worse than the paralysis of his body. A significant debate among historians centers on the emotional calculus of your new partnership. Did you dedicate yourself to his recovery out of a renewed sense of love, a profound and unshakable sense of duty, or the pragmatic realization that his political ambition was now the only vehicle through which you could both find purpose and meaning? Whatever the motivation, your actions are decisive. You become his legs and his eyes. You push him, encourage him, and refuse to let him surrender to the fate his mother has envisioned for him. You have lost a husband in the conventional sense, but you have gained a new, profound, and complex purpose. You are no longer just the wife in the background. You are now an essential, indispensable partner in his survival and his future. The shy, awkward girl is gone for good, burned away in the twin fires of betrayal and disease. In her place stands a woman of iron will, ready to step onto a stage she never sought. The stage is set, but you have no script. Franklin is fighting his way back, learning to stand on legs encased in heavy steel braces, a monumental effort of will. But his physical presence in the political arena is impossible for now. It falls to you to be his proxy. It's a terrifying prospect. You are still, at heart, the shy woman who prefers a good book to a crowded room. But Franklin's political advisor, the gnarled, asthmatic, and brilliant Louis Howe, sees the path forward. He tells you flatly that Franklin's name must be kept in the public consciousness, and you are the one who must do it. He becomes your unlikely, and often brutally honest, political tutor. He pushes you into the world of New York's Democratic Party, a world of smoke-filled rooms, backslapping deals, and men who are not accustomed to taking women seriously. You quickly realize most of them expect you to be there to pour the coffee, and are utterly flummoxed when you offer a cogent political opinion instead. Your first few speeches are nerve-wracking ordeals. Your voice, which you've always disliked, shoots up into a high, reedy pitch. You have a nervous habit of giggling at the most inappropriate moments. The experience is the political equivalent of a teenager's first driving lesson jerky, frightening, and a potential hazard to everyone within earshot. But with Howe's relentless coaching and your own quiet determination, you improve. You begin to find your own way, not just as Franklin's stand-in, but as a political force in your own right. You become deeply involved with the Women's Trade Union League, standing on picket lines with striking factory workers. You join the League of Women Voters. Suddenly, your social circle isn't about society hostesses. It's filled with tough, passionate, chain-smoking female activists and union organizers, women like Rose Schneiderman and Marian Dickerman. Their world is one of gritty reality, not inherited privilege. They talk about unsafe working conditions, starvation wages, and the lack of basic rights for women and children. In their stories, you hear echoes of the struggles you once observed in the servants of your grandmother's house. Your childhood empathy now has a political vocabulary. It has a purpose. Primary sources offer conflicting accounts regarding your initial motivation for this deep dive into activism. Did you eagerly seize this new public role as a long-awaited liberation from your domestic confines? Or did you step into the breach as a reluctant foot soldier, constantly prodded by Louis Howe and only gradually discovering your own fire for the cause? The truth, perhaps, is somewhere in between. It begins as a duty to Franklin, but it ignites a genuine passion within you. You also take a step that is purely for yourself. You begin teaching history and American literature at the Todhunter School for Girls in Manhattan. It gives you a sense of purpose that is entirely your own, and just as importantly, your own paycheck. You are building an identity separate from being Mrs. Franklin D. Roosevelt. By 1928, when Franklin feels strong enough to run for governor of New York, you are no longer a reluctant proxy, but a skilled and respected political partner. His victory is your victory too. And as the governor's wife, you utterly shatter the traditional mold. The role is typically one of a smiling hostess, a gracious presence at official functions. You do that, of course, but you do so much more. You start traveling the state, visiting the places that polite society and most politicians ignore. You go down into mines. You walk through the wards of state mental hospitals. You inspect prisons and orphanages. You talk to people. You listen. You see the conditions with your own eyes, the crumbling infrastructure, the inadequate care, the quiet desperation. Then you return to the governor's mansion in Albany. At the end of the day, after Franklin has finished his official duties, you sit with him and you tell him what you have seen. You become his eyes and ears, his personal conduit to the reality of life for the state's most vulnerable citizens. Your reports are not dry statistics. They are vivid, human stories. You are shaping his understanding, influencing his policies from the ground up. This partnership, forged in betrayal and tempered by illness, has found its rhythm. He is the charming, political visionary. You are the roving conscience, the fact finder, the one who ensures that the real lives of people are never just an abstraction in a policy debate. You have found your footing, and you are just beginning to understand the power of your own voice. The depression deepens across America, a creeping fog of despair that settles over cities and farms alike, while you travel the state of New York, witnessing its localized struggles. Franklin's ambition and the nation's desperation are setting him on a path to a much larger stage. In 1932, he accepts the Democratic nomination for president, promising a New Deal for the American people. His optimism, his infectious confidence broadcast over the radio, is a lifeline to a country drowning in hopelessness. He wins the election in a landslide, and just like that, you are to become the First Lady of the United States. This should be a moment of triumph. For you, it is a moment of profound dread. You look at your future home, the White House, and see not a symbol of power, but a magnificent, marble-floored prison. You have spent the last decade painstakingly building a life of purpose and independence. Your teaching, your activism, your network of passionate reformers. You fear that the role of First Lady, with its rigid traditions and ceremonial duties, will extinguish all of it. The traditional job description seems to involve smiling politely, selecting fine china patterns, and hosting teas. You're fairly certain you would rather be back in a dusty mine shaft, talking to miners about their children's health. You confess to your friends that you fear becoming a state prisoner, trapped by protocol, your hard-won voice silenced. When you arrive in Washington in March of 1933, the city is a portrait of the nation's misery. The ghost of the bonus army. World War I veterans who had come to demand their promised pensions and were violently driven out by federal troops still haunts the Capitol. You can feel the anxiety in the cold winter air. Banks are failing. Millions are unemployed, and families are losing their homes and farms. The scale of the suffering is almost incomprehensible. This is the crisis you are walking into. Scholarly opinion is divided on how you initially perceived your role in this new administration. Did you arrive in Washington with a clear, preconceived blueprint for social reform, ready to implement a grand strategy? Or did your legendary activism as First Lady evolve more organically, shaped by the sheer, overwhelming deluge of mail that began to pour into the White House? Because the letters come, they come in sacks, thousands upon thousands of them every week. They are addressed to you, not just to the president. They are written in pencil on scraps of paper, from factory workers and sharecroppers, from desperate mothers and unemployed fathers. They are not asking for policy papers. They are telling you their stories. They are telling you that their children are hungry, that the new shoes they bought have worn through, that they are losing hope. It's as if the nation's inbox is overflowing, and you are the only one willing to hit reply all with genuine empathy. You realize very quickly that you cannot, and will not, be the passive, decorative First Lady you feared you would become. You have a choice. You can retreat behind the formal walls of the White House, or you can tear those walls down. You choose to tear them down. One of your very first acts is a quiet revolution. You announce that you will hold your own regular press conferences. This is unheard of, but you add a condition that makes it even more radical. Only female reporters are allowed to attend. At a time when newspaper women were often relegated to the society pages, you give them direct, consistent access to the White House, ensuring they have hard news to report and securing their jobs. You refuse to let the White House be an isolated island of privilege. You begin to treat it as a true public forum. You invite people who have never before been welcomed into the executive mansion. Labor leaders, student activists, impoverished farmers, Black community organizers. They all find themselves sitting in the formal rooms, talking to the First Lady, sharing their perspectives. You are creating a new kind of information highway, one that bypasses the traditional gatekeepers and funnels the realities of the country directly into the heart of the administration. You may have entered this new role with trepidation, but it is becoming clear that you will not be defined by it. You will define it. The country is in crisis, and you are positioning yourself to be at the very center of the fight. The letters keep coming, a daily tide of paper and ink, carrying the hopes and fears of a nation. You and your small staff work tirelessly to answer them, but you know that for every letter you answer, 1,000 more sit unread. You are having individual conversations, but you feel a deep, pressing need to have a national one. You need a bigger platform, a way to speak not just to activists and reporters, but to everyone, every day, in their own homes. The opportunity arrives in 1935 when a newspaper syndicate approaches you with a novel idea. Would you be willing to write a daily column? Your first instinct is to refuse. The thought of having to generate a fresh, coherent opinion every single day is frankly exhausting. Some days, your most profound thought revolves around whether there's any good jam left for your toast. You worry about decorum. Can the First Lady of the United States really be a syndicated columnist, like a gossip writer or a sports journalist? More than that, you worry you'll simply run out of things to say. But the idea takes root. You see it not as a performance, but as an extension of your correspondence, a letter to the nation. You agree, on the condition that you can write about whatever you want. You decide to call it, simply, My Day. And so, late at night, after the state dinners are over and the endless stream of meetings has finally ceased, you sit down at your desk. The great historic house is quiet around you. The only sounds are the soft scratch of your pen on paper and the distant, muffled hum of the sleeping Capitol. In this small circle of lamplight, you begin to write. The column is a diary, a daily glimpse into your life. The structure is deceptively simple. You write about your schedule, the people you've met, the places you've been. You talk about the grandchildren's visits, the challenges of planning a state dinner, the funny antics of your beloved Scottish terrier, Fala. One day you're writing about a meeting with a foreign dignitary. The next, you're describing how Fala cheekily stole a sausage from the breakfast table. The American public gets a bit of whiplash, but they are utterly charmed. But woven into this gentle, domestic tapestry are threads of steel. You master the art of the quiet political statement. You might start by describing the beautiful flowers in the White House garden. And then, in the very next paragraph, describe your afternoon visit to a bleak, impoverished tenement, where children have no place to play. You don't preach or lecture. You simply place the two images side by side and let the reader draw their own conclusions. You write about a book you're reading on racial injustice. You mention a conversation with a union organizer. You talk about the need for better schools, for public health, for compassion. You essentially become the nation's first superstar influencer, only instead of promoting questionable diet supplements, you're selling social justice and human dignity. Academic circles remain divided about the column's true political function. Was My Day a genuinely personal, almost naive diary that just happened to reflect your political views, or was it a masterful and subtle political tool, carefully curated by you and the administration to humanize the New Deal, to float controversial trial balloons, and to build a groundswell of public support for policies that might otherwise seem radical? It was likely a bit of both. You were genuinely sharing your world, but you were also keenly aware of the power of your words. The column is an unprecedented success. It eventually runs 6 days a week for over a quarter of a century, long after you leave the White House. You become a daily, familiar presence in the lives of millions of Americans. They start their morning with a cup of coffee and your column. They feel they know you, not as the remote and formal First Lady, but as Eleanor. This creates a bond of trust and affection that is unique in American public life. It gives you a platform that is entirely your own, independent of Franklin's political fortunes. He holds the official power of the presidency, but you are cultivating a different kind of power, the power of influence, of moral authority, built one quiet, unassuming column at a time. Through My Day, you have opened a direct line from your heart and mind to the heart and mind of the country. Your column, My Day, tells the American people where you are, but it's your physical presence across the country that truly changes the game. Franklin, anchored to the White House by his heavy leg braces and the duties of his office, can't see the nation's suffering firsthand. He can read reports and study statistics, but he can't feel the dust of the Oklahoma plains in his lungs or see the hopelessness in the eyes of a laid-off factory worker in Detroit. But you can. You take the role you perfected as governor's wife in New York and deploy it on a massive, continental scale. You will be his eyes, his ears, and his legs. And so, you begin to travel, It is a relentless, near-constant motion. You log 40,000 miles in your first year as First Lady alone. You journey by train, rattling through the dark countryside at night, the lonely whistle a mournful sound in the vast emptiness. You travel by car over bumpy, unpaved roads, and you take to the skies in the still novel passenger planes of the era. Your schedule is so punishing that the Secret Service agents assigned to your detail, fit and capable men, struggle to keep up. They give you a code name, meant to be kept secret but which eventually leaks out Rover. Oh, it's both a testament to your ceaseless energy and sounds a little bit like you should be chasing squirrels on the south lawn. The nickname Eleanor Everywhere starts appearing in newspapers, a mixture of awe and gentle mockery that you wear as a badge of honor. You don't go to the easy places. You don't cut ribbons at gleaming new post offices and move on. You intentionally seek out the forgotten corners of America. You descend into the dark, damp tunnels of a coal mine in Appalachia, your white gloves stained with coal dust, to talk with men whose lungs are slowly turning to stone. You sit in the sweltering heat of a migrant worker camp in California, listening to families who have lost their farms to the Dust Bowl. You walk through the segregated, underfunded wards of a hospital in the Deep South. You visit federal prisons, desolate Native American reservations, and the grim, tar paper shack communities known as Hoovervilles that sprout on the edges of cities. You have a knack for showing up unannounced at federal relief projects, much to the quiet panic of the local administrators. Nothing inspires bureaucratic efficiency quite like the sudden, unscheduled arrival of the First Lady asking pointed questions about the budget. Some historians question whether these journeys were systematically planned reconnaissance missions designed to gather specific data for New Deal agencies, or if they were more impromptu, conscience-driven tours, their destinations often chosen based on a particularly moving letter you'd received that week. The reality is that they were both. You were on a personal mission to bear witness, but you were also a keenly effective government inspector. You don't just observe from a distance. You get out of the car. You walk into the shacks. You sit on splintered porch steps and accept a glass of water from a family who has little else to give. You ask about their children, their health, their hopes. You collect their stories, not as data points, but as human truths. The traveling is only the first part of the job. The second, and arguably more important part, happens when you return to Washington. The scene becomes a ritual. Late at night, long after the official business of the day is done, you sit with Franklin in his study. The air is thick with the scent of his cigarettes and the quiet rustle of paperwork. And you talk. You become his living, breathing newsfeed, delivering information far more potent than any typed government report. You don't just tell him that unemployment in a certain county is at 30%. You tell him about the family you met there, about the father's worn-out shoes and the mother's quiet dignity as she described feeding her family on watery soup. You paint pictures with your words, forcing him to see the faces behind the policies. You are his conscience, the constant, gentle, and sometimes insistent voice, reminding him of the profound human stakes of every decision he makes. Your travels are not tourism. They are the fuel for the engine of the New Deal. Bearing witness to the nation's pain is not enough for you. Reporting back to Franklin, while vital, feels like only half the job. You carry the faces of the people you meet with you into the formal, chandeliered rooms of the White House, the quiet desperation of a sharecropper's wife, the hacking cough of a miner, the weary anger of a black farmer denied a loan, these stories become a fire in your belly. You cannot simply be a passive observer. You must become an advocate, a champion for the oppressed, even when it is politically dangerous. You become the White House's resident squeaky wheel, the relentless voice of conscience that Franklin and his advisors learned to expect after one of your long trips. Your advocacy starts with the people whose plight first captured your attention, the rural poor. You become the driving force behind the creation of Arthurdale, a subsistence homestead community in West Virginia. The idea is to move destitute miners and their families out of grim company towns and into a planned community where they can farm, learn new skills, and build a better life. It is your pet project, a utopian experiment into which you pour your own energy and influence. It is also, in the end, a costly and complicated venture, criticized as a socialist fantasy by some and a boondoggle by others. But it is a testament to your core belief that the government has a moral obligation to intervene, to provide not just relief, but opportunity and dignity. This advocacy is noble, but your next step is truly audacious. You turn your attention to the issue of racial injustice. This is the third rail of American politics. Franklin's New Deal coalition depends entirely on the support of powerful, segregationist Southern Democrats who chair most of the committees in Congress. To openly challenge the system of Jim Crow is to risk scuttling his entire legislative agenda. The political calculus is clear. Play it safe. But your conscience, honed by what you've seen in the segregated South, will not allow it. You forge a deep and lasting friendship with Mary McLeod Bethune, a formidable Black educator and activist. You admire her intelligence and her unyielding dedication to her people. Through your influence, she becomes a key figure in the administration, heading the Division of Negro Affairs in the National Youth Administration. You and she work together to create what becomes known as the Black Cabinet, an informal council of African American leaders who advise the president on issues affecting their communities. You use the symbolic power of your position to make powerful statements. You invite Black singers to perform at the White House. You are photographed with Black leaders. And when you attend meetings in the South that are segregated by law, you pointedly place your chair in the aisle, squarely between the white and Black sections. A quiet act of civil disobedience that speaks louder than any speech. Debate continues among historians regarding the political dynamic between you and Franklin on the explosive issue of race. Was this a carefully coordinated good cop, bad cop routine, where you could be the public conscience of the administration, speaking to Black voters and liberal activists, while Franklin placated the Southern Bloc to get his bills passed? Or were you frequently acting as a rogue agent, driven by your own convictions, pushing Franklin's administration further and faster than it wanted to go? Many of the powerful politicians in Washington certainly saw you as a meddler, treating your pleas for racial equality with a sort of horrified politeness, as if you had just committed a grave social error. The truth is likely a complex mix, a political partnership where you constantly tested the boundaries of what was possible, sometimes with his tacit approval, and sometimes to his genuine political discomfort. You become a relentless supporter of a federal anti-lynching bill, a piece of legislation that Franklin, for all his private sympathies, is terrified to publicly endorse for fear of alienating the South. You are essentially operating a one-woman NGO from inside the executive mansion, using your immense social capital and moral authority to push for causes the rest of the political establishment would much rather ignore. For millions of African Americans who see a system entirely stacked against them. You become a singular beacon of hope. For the first time, someone in the White House seems to see them, to hear them, and to believe in their fight for justice. You are redefining the role of First Lady from a social hostess to a moral activist, and you are about to make your most dramatic statement yet. Your advocacy for racial justice has, up to this point, been a series of powerful but relatively quiet maneuvers, a strategically placed chair, a controversial guest list, a steady pressure campaign behind the scenes. But in the winter of 1939, an incident occurs that will pull your convictions out from the private corridors of the White House and place them firmly on the national stage, demanding a public and unequivocal response. The incident revolves around a single, magnificent voice. Her name is Marian Anderson, and she is one of the greatest contralto singers in the world. She has performed for kings and queens in the grand concert halls of Europe, where she is hailed as a once-in-a-generation talent. But in her own country, she is often judged not by her voice, but by the color of her skin. In 1939, Howard University, a historically black institution in Washington, D.C., attempts to schedule a concert for her. The best and largest venue in the city is Constitution Hall. There is only one problem. The hall is owned and managed by the Daughters of the American Revolution, the prestigious society of women descended from the patriots of the Revolutionary War, and you are one of its most famous members. The DAR refuses to allow Miss Anderson to perform. They cite a clause in their contracts that restricts the stage to white artists only. The official reasoning gets a bit tangled and defensive, but the core message is brutally, offensively clear. It's the 1930s high society version of a velvet rope, used as a tool of racial segregation. When you hear the news, you are incensed. This is not some abstract policy debate. It is a direct, public insult to a world-class artist and to the entire African-American community. It is an affront to the very principles of liberty that the DAR purports to uphold. And it is happening in your city, under your nose. Your first move is to try to work behind the scenes, to persuade the DR to reverse its decision. They refuse to budge. You are faced with a stark choice. You can remain silent, tacitly accepting their decision and preserving your standing within the organization. Or you can take a stand that will have explosive consequences. You choose to act. A point of contention among biographers is whether your next move was a spontaneous, emotional act of conscience or a carefully calculated political statement, perhaps planned with the administration's knowledge. Was it a personal gesture or a piece of political theater? Given the fallout, it was undeniably both. You sit down to write My Day, but this column will be different. In it, you calmly and methodically announce your resignation from the Daughters of the American Revolution. Publicly quitting a powerful and patriotic women's society simply isn't something a First Lady does. It's the social equivalent of flipping over the card table at a high-stakes bridge game. Eyebrows across Washington don't just get raised, they practically launch into orbit. You write that the organization has set an unfortunate example, and that by barring Marian Anderson, they are acting against the spirit of the country they claim to represent. You state, to remain as a member implies approval of that action, and therefore I am resigning. The column, published on February 27th, detonates a national controversy. The story goes viral, 1939 style, spreading like fire through radio broadcasts and newspaper headlines. You are inundated with messages of both condemnation and praise. But your singular, public act of protest does something crucial. It transforms the situation. It's no longer just about a singer in a hall. It's about justice, dignity, and the meaning of American democracy. In the firestorm you've created, a new, more powerful idea is forged. Working with the Progressive Secretary of the Interior, Harold Ickes, a plan is hatched. If Marian Anderson cannot sing in the hall of the Daughters of the American Revolution, she will sing instead in the Temple of American Liberty. On a cool Easter Sunday, Marian Anderson stands on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, the majestic statue of the great emancipator at her back. She is wrapped in a fur coat against the evening chill. She closes her eyes and begins to sing. Her voice, rich and powerful, soars over a crowd of 75,000 people, black and white, rich and poor, who have gathered on the National Mall to listen. It is one of the most iconic and moving moments in the history of the American Civil Rights Movement, and it would not have happened without you. Your resignation was the catalyst, the moral spark that ignited a beautiful, defiant flame of protest, its light reaching all the way into the darkest corners of a segregated nation. The triumphant chords of Marian Anderson's voice at the Lincoln Memorial seemed to hang in the air for a moment, a symbol of hope and progress. But as the 1930s draw to a close, a different sound begins to travel across the Atlantic. A low, menacing drumbeat of marching feet and shattering glass. The news bulletins crackling over the radio are no longer just about crop prices and unemployment figures. They carry names like Hitler, Mussolini, and Sudetenland. The storm clouds that have been gathering over Europe are about to break, and the crisis of the Great Depression is slowly being overshadowed by the terrifying prospect of a world at war. As the nation's focus shifts, so does the nature of the criticism against you. Your unprecedented activism has made you a beloved figure to millions, but it has also made you a prime target for those who despise Franklin's New Deal and everything you stand for. You have become a national Rorschach test. To your supporters, you are a tireless champion of the downtrodden. To your detractors, you are a meddling, radical socialist who has overstepped every conceivable boundary of a first lady's role. The attacks become more frequent and more vicious. Conservative congressmen, like Martin Dies and his committee investigating un-American activities, accuse the progressive youth groups and civil rights organizations you support of being fronts for communism. Your name gets dragged through the mud on the floor of Congress. So often you start to feel you should be sending them invoices for the emotional labor. They mock your high-pitched voice. They caricature your physical appearance in cruel political cartoons. They attack your children, painting them as spoiled opportunists riding their parents' coattails. You learn the hard lesson that being a powerful woman with strong opinions is a full-contact sport. You have critics, you have trolls, you have haters. They just have to use a 3-cent stamp to mail their vitriol instead of clicking a button. Historians still argue whether the sheer intensity of these personal attacks was primarily a political reaction to your progressive, anti-racist ideologies, or if it was fueled by a deeper, more visceral societal discomfort with a first lady who so completely shattered traditional gender roles. Were they attacking your ideas, or were they attacking the very idea of you? It was, of course, both. You represented a new kind of woman in public life, and it terrified the old guard. While Franklin, ever the pragmatist, navigates the treacherous currents of American isolationism. You become one of the administration's most forceful voices for internationalism and preparedness. You watch the fall of France in 1940 with a sense of horror and dread. Through My Day and your public speeches, you argue that America cannot hide from the world's problems. You speak of the moral necessity of aiding Great Britain and the other allies fighting against fascism. You try to rally a complacent nation to the reality of the threat, a reality that many do not want to see. In 1941, as the country builds its military and industrial might, Franklin gives you your first official, paid government position. He appoints you as the co-director of the Office of Civilian Defense, or OCD. Your role is to bolster home front morale and coordinate volunteer efforts. It seems like a natural fit, but the job quickly bogs down in bureaucratic infighting and political squabbles. Your attempts to make the OCD a vehicle for social progress, promoting nutrition, arts programs, and racial equality in defense preparations are met with resistance and ridicule. Your tenure there is frustrating and ultimately short-lived, a bruising lesson in the realities of government bureaucracy. But all the political sniping, the personal whispers, and the bureaucratic battles are about to become terrifyingly irrelevant. It is a quiet Sunday morning, December 7th, 1941. You are at the White House. The news comes suddenly, a shockwave that rips through the calm of the day. The naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, has been attacked by the Empire of Japan. The abstract threat of war is now a brutal, bloody reality. That night, you give your scheduled radio address. Your voice is calm, but imbued with a new gravity. You speak of the shock and the anger, but also of the resolve that will be required. The whispers of your critics are drowned out by the roar of planes and the call to arms. America is at war, and your role, along with the fate of the entire world, has just been changed forever. The war changes everything. The domestic battles over New Deal programs, the political sniping, the social causes, they are all now secondary to the single, all-consuming goal of winning a global conflict. Your role shifts once again. The relentless energy you once poured into touring Appalachian mining towns is now redirected to visiting shipyards and defense plants, encouraging the women who have streamed into the workforce to build the planes and tanks for the arsenal of democracy. But America's fight is no longer just at home. It's in the hedgerows of France, the deserts of North Africa, and the dense, malarial jungles of the South Pacific. And you decide you must go there, too. In 1942, you travel to Great Britain to witness the British war effort and visit American troops stationed there. You walk through the bombed-out streets of London. You see the quiet, unyielding resolve of a people who have endured the Blitz. And you talk with women working in factories and on farms. You stay at Buckingham Palace with the King and Queen, but you insist on eating the same strictly rationed food as every other British citizen, a small gesture of solidarity that is deeply appreciated. But it's your next journey that will become the stuff of legend. In 1943, Admiral William Bull Halsey, the commander of naval forces in the South Pacific, extends a reluctant invitation for you to tour the region. He, like many in the military brass, initially sees your visit as a public relations fluff piece, a potential distraction from the serious business of war. One minute you're writing about gardening in your My Day column. The next you're planning a trip to an active war zone. It's a rather dramatic career pivot, even by your standards. The admirals and generals are skeptical, viewing your trip as a logistical headache. They will soon learn that you require far less coddling than their own staff cars and have a profoundly better impact on morale. You embark on a grueling 5-week, 25,000-mile odyssey through the Pacific Theater. The journey itself is an ordeal. You spend hundreds of hours in loud, rattling, unheated military transport planes, sitting on hard metal seats, hopping from one remote, newly won island to another islands with names like Guadalcanal, places that were once just spots on a map but are now soaked in American blood. The heat is suffocating. The risk of disease is constant, and the threat of enemy attack is never far away. Your true mission, however, is not to meet with the commanders, but to visit the wounded. You spend your days in the long, quiet wards of makeshift military hospitals. The air is thick with the smell of antiseptic and the oppressive heat. Here, you see the true cost of the war. You see boys, and they are so very young, with devastating wounds, their bodies shattered by shrapnel, their minds haunted by what they've seen. You don't just walk past. You go to every single bed, even in the psychiatric wards that other dignitaries avoid. You stop and you talk to each soldier. You ask his name, where he's from. You ask if he has a message for his family. You take down notes, promising to call his mother when you get back. Military and historical accounts offer differing perspectives on the commander's initial reception to your tour. Admiral Halsey himself later admitted he had been against the visit, but became a fervent admirer, writing that you had accomplished more good than any other person or any group of civilians who had passed through my area. You become a legend among the troops. For a lonely, wounded soldier, thousands of miles from home. Seeing you suddenly materialize at his bedside is so surreal, it's like a pleasant fever dream. You are not the first lady in that moment. You are a mother, a tangible link to the home and the life he is fighting for. You bring a quiet, maternal strength, a deep and genuine compassion that is a balm in a world of institutionalized violence and pain. You return to the United States physically exhausted, gaunt, and having lost 30 pounds, but spiritually energized. You have seen the courage and the sacrifice of the American fighting man up close. You carry their stories back with you, and through your column and your speeches, you share them with the nation, making the distant, bloody conflict more personal, more real. You have taken your role as the nation's conscience and transformed it on a global scale, becoming the nation's heart, delivering comfort and a sense of home to the farthest, darkest corners of the war. By the spring of 1945, victory in Europe is no longer a question of if, but when. The Allied armies are closing in on Berlin, and the great, terrible war machine of the Third Reich is collapsing. But the man who has led the free world through this crisis is fading. Franklin is visibly exhausted, a shadow of the vibrant, buoyant man he once was. The 12 years of ceaseless strain, the depression, the political battles, the global war have taken their final, brutal toll. He is thin, his face is gray, and his legendary energy has dimmed to a flicker. Seeking rest, he travels to his beloved retreat in Warm Springs, Georgia, the place where he had first fought to regain his strength after polio. You are in Washington, attending a charity event, when the call comes on the afternoon of April 12th. The message is terse, stripped of all ceremony. The president has fainted. Another call follows quickly. The president is dead. A massive cerebral hemorrhage. Just like that. The center of your world for 4 decades. The anchor of a nation's hopes is gone. You rush to Georgia. The journey a blur of motion and a profound internal stillness. When you arrive at the little White House, the idyllic cottage surrounded by Georgia pines. You walk into a scene of quiet, stunned grief, and it is here that you face one last, private heartbreak. You learn that Franklin was not alone when he died. Lucy Mercer, now a widow herself, had been with him that afternoon, posing for a portrait, the woman whose love letters you had discovered nearly 30 years before, the discovery that had irrevocably broken your marriage and set you on your own path, was there at the very end. The grief for your political partner, the father of your children, and the leader of the free world is now layered with the quiet, complex sorrow of this final betrayal. Biographers have long debated the emotional significance of this final discovery. Was it a fresh, sharp stab of pain, reopening all the old wounds, or was it merely a sad, quiet confirmation of the truth you had lived with for decades, that you and Franklin, for all your public partnership, had lived separate emotional lives? A melancholy footnote to a union that was less a simple marriage and more a historical event with occasional shared meals. Whatever the feeling, it adds a layer of profound and personal complexity to a moment of global mourning. The slow train ride back to Washington is a long, rolling funeral procession. As you pass through the countryside, through the Carolinas and Virginia, you look out the window. At every station, every small town, every rural crossroads, people are gathered. They stand in silence, heads bowed, holding hats over their hearts, black faces and white faces, old and young, soldiers and civilians. The entire tapestry of the nation you had crisscrossed for years is there, lining the tracks to say goodbye. They are not just mourning a president. It feels as if gravity has suddenly weakened. For an entire generation of Americans, he was the only leader they had ever really known. His voice on the radio was a source of comfort and strength. And now, it is silent. Back in Washington, the mantle of leadership passes to Harry Truman, the vice president, a man as shocked and unprepared for the role as anyone. You meet with him in the White House, the home that is no longer yours. He is overwhelmed, and you, in your own grief, offer him your strength. "Is there anything we can do for you?" he asks you. Your reply is telling of your view of the partnership. "No, Harry," you say gently. "Is there anything we can do for you? For you are the one in trouble now." The funeral is a somber state affair. You endure it with the stoic dignity the world has come to expect from you. Afterward, as you prepare to leave the White House for good, a reporter asks you what you will do now. Your answer is simple and speaks to the immense finality of the moment. The story is over. You say, you are 60 years old. You are a widow. You are, for the first time in 12 years, a private citizen. The great, defining chapter of your life, your partnership with Franklin Delano Roosevelt, has come to a close. You face a future that is a vast, empty, and silent unknown. Of course, you couldn't have been more wrong. The story wasn't over. It was merely the end of a very long and very complicated first act. You retreat to Valkill, your comfortable, unpretentious cottage in Hyde Park, New York. The quiet is a welcome blanket after the constant noise of the White House. You are surrounded by Franklin's papers, a mountain of history to be sorted, and your own grief, a silent, constant companion. You believe you will live out your days here, writing your column, seeing your children and grandchildren, a quiet epilogue to a tumultuous life. You have told the world and yourself that your story is over. But President Truman has other ideas. Late in 1945, he calls you. He is preparing to send the first American delegation to the newly formed United Nations in London, and he wants you to be a part of it. Your first reaction is a wave of insecurity. You tell him you have no experience in foreign policy, that you are not an academic or a diplomat. But Truman is insistent. He knows that your name carries immense moral authority around the globe. You are a living symbol of the fight against fascism and a champion of human dignity. Reluctantly, you agree, driven by your deep belief that the UN represents the last, best hope for lasting peace, the very cause for which Franklin had fought and died. When you arrive in London, your insecurities feel justified. The rest of the American delegation is composed of powerful senators and foreign policy experts like John Foster Dulles. They are polite, but also visibly condescending. Seeing you as a sentimental lightweight, they assign you to what they consider a backwater committee, Committee 3, responsible for humanitarian, social, and cultural affairs. They figure you can talk about charity and feelings while the serious men handle the important business of geopolitics. It will go down in history as one of their most significant miscalculations. It is on Committee 3 that you are asked to serve on the commission tasked with an audacious goal to draft an international Bill of Rights for all humankind. You are then elected as its chairperson. Your job, essentially, is to get more than 50 countries' nations with wildly different cultures, political systems, and philosophies, many of whom were recently at war with one another, to agree on the fundamental meaning of freedom and human dignity. It is like trying to persuade a pack of wolves, a flock of sheep, and a pride of lions to co-author a book on dietary harmony. The task seems impossible. The early meetings are fraught with tension, particularly between the Western democracies and the Soviet bloc. The Soviet delegate, Andrei Vyshinsky, is a formidable, aggressive debater. In an early confrontation over the fate of war refugees, everyone expects you to be steamrolled. Instead, you listen patiently, and when it is your turn to speak, you set aside your notes. You speak from the heart, drawing on your years of visiting camps and seeing suffering firsthand. You speak of human dignity not as a political concept, but as a lived reality. You win the argument, and in the process, you win the stunned respect of your colleagues. The amateur has proven her mettle. For 2 years, you steer the fractious commission through marathon sessions in New York, London, and Geneva. The debates are endless, circling around the meaning of a single word for hours. Primary sources offer conflicting accounts on the exact origins of every article, debating whether the final document was shaped more by your American New Deal progressivism or by the deep philosophical contributions of international members like France's René Cassin or China's P.C. Cheng. In truth, its genius lies in that very synthesis. You are not its sole author, but you are its undisputed guide and moral engine, holding the entire fragile enterprise together with your legendary patience, persistence, and profound belief in the project. Finally, on a cold night in Paris. On December 10, 1948, the final draft of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is presented to the UN General Assembly. As the 30 articles are read, a hush falls over the Great Hall. It proclaims that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. It lists the right to life, to liberty, to asylum, to education, to be free from slavery and torture. When the vote is called, It passes overwhelmingly. The delegates rise in a long, sustained standing ovation, not for the document, but for you. You, the woman who thought her story was over, have just helped give the world a new story to strive for. President Truman would later give you a new title, one that sticks: the First Lady of the World. With the triumph of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, you could have easily declared your work finished. You have more than earned a quiet retirement. When Dwight D. Eisenhower, a Republican, wins the presidency in 1952, you promptly resign your official post at the United Nations. You return home to Valkill. But your idea of slowing down would still be considered a state of extreme overexertion for most ordinary people. Retirement for you simply means you are now free to choose your own battles, without the constraints of an official government title. You are no longer a delegate, but you have never been more in demand. You become, in effect, the nation's conscience at large. Your cottage at Valkill is no longer just a home, it's a destination, an informal court where the powerful and the hopeful come to pay tribute and seek counsel. On any given day, you might be hosting a world leader like India's Prime Minister Nehru, a young, ambitious senator named John F. Kennedy, or a group of student activists from the burgeoning civil rights movement. You have become the ultimate mentor, the wise elder of American liberalism. Young activists make the pilgrimage to your door seeking wisdom, and you provide it, often along with a simple lunch and some frank advice on strategy. Your travels do not stop, they merely change sponsors. You journey across the globe, speaking at universities, meeting with humanitarian groups, and continuing your lifelong education about the world. You take a televised trip through the Soviet Union, engaging in a fascinating and publicly debated impromptu meeting with its leader, Nikita Khrushchev. You continue to write My Day, your remarkable 6-day-a-week column that keeps you connected to the American public. And you embrace the powerful new medium of television, hosting your own interview program, proving that a thoughtful, substantive conversation could, at least for a moment, be just as compelling as the game shows and sitcoms that dominate the airwaves. You are a powerful voice during a complicated time. You speak out forcefully against the paranoid excesses of Senator Joseph McCarthy and his anti-communist witch hunts, defending civil liberties at a time when it is unpopular and even dangerous to do so. You are a passionate supporter of Adlai Stevenson's 2 presidential campaigns, and though he loses, you help shape the intellectual and moral core of the Democratic Party's platform. You become a crucial bridge, linking the ideals of your husband's New Deal to a new generation. When John F. Kennedy wins the presidency in 1960, he effectively brings you back into the fold. Academic debate continues over the degree of your influence on his New Frontier administration. Did the young, pragmatic Kennedy team genuinely seek your counsel as a treasured link to the party's progressive soul? Or was their embrace of you a savvy political move to secure the unwavering loyalty of the liberal base you commanded? Whatever the motive, he reappoints you as a delegate to the UN. More importantly, he establishes the President's Commission on the Status of Women and asks you to be its first chairperson. It is a fitting capstone to your career, bringing your focus back to the rights and opportunities of women, a cause that had animated you since your earliest days as an activist. In this final, remarkable chapter of your life, you are no longer defined by your relationship to anyone else. You are not Eliot's daughter, Franklin's wife, or even the president's widow. You are simply Eleanor Roosevelt, a figure of immense global stature in your own right. Your power derives not from an office, but from a lifetime of integrity, courage, and an unshakable connection to the struggles of ordinary people. You are the living history of the American 20th century, and you are spending your final years ensuring its lessons are passed on to the generations who will shape the future. The work on the Commission on the Status of Women is your final great project, but as you enter your late 70s, the boundless energy that carried you across oceans and through war zones finally begins to ebb. Your body, which has endured so much for so long, begins to fail you. You are diagnosed with aplastic anemia, and later, a rare form of bone marrow tuberculosis. The pain is often constant, but you face it with the same quiet, uncomplaining dignity with which you faced every other challenge in your life. You continue to write, to welcome visitors to Valkill, to engage with the world, your mind, a bright, clear flame, even as the vessel that holds it grows fragile. In the quiet moments, as you look out from your cottage at the changing seasons over the Hudson Valley, the long arc of your life must seem like a strange and improbable dream. You can likely still feel the ghost of that lonely, serious little girl in the starched dress, the one they called Granny, who felt so plain and out of place. And yet, here you are, a beloved figure, hailed as the First Lady of the world. A question that biographers and historians will forever ponder is the ultimate source of that incredible, lifelong drive. Was it a constant quest to prove your worth to the memory of a beautiful, distant mother and an adored, lost father? Was it a deep, almost spiritual sense of noblesse oblige, a duty to serve, or was it, perhaps, something simpler? The profound and unwavering empathy of a person who, having known deep sorrow herself, simply could not turn her back on the sorrow of others. You never held a formal, elected office. You never commanded an army or ran a vast corporation. Your primary tools were a typewriter for your column, a suitcase for your travels, and a seemingly inexhaustible well of compassion. And as it turned out, that was more than enough. You showed that true power wasn't always about giving orders or making thunderous speeches. Sometimes, real power is about listening. It's about showing up, bearing witness, and quietly, persistently, stubbornly refusing to accept that things must be as they are. That serious little girl who felt she belonged nowhere ended up becoming a grandmother to an entire nation, finally finding her place by making a place for everyone else. On November 7th, 1962, at the age of 78, in your own apartment in New York City, your long journey comes to a peaceful end. You die in your sleep. The world mourns. Tributes pour in from presidents, kings, and everyday people whose lives you touched. President Kennedy orders all American flags to be flown at half-staff, a tribute usually reserved for presidents. You are laid to rest next to Franklin in the Rose Garden at Hyde Park. The final stillness, a stark contrast to a life lived in constant, purposeful motion. And now, as our story closes, just let that thought settle. Picture the quiet garden in Hyde Park, perhaps a soft blanket of snow beginning to fall, covering the ground and muffling all sound. The great striving energy of that life has found its rest. The endless travels are over. The battles have been fought. The voice that once challenged presidents and comforted wounded soldiers has fallen silent. All that remains is the deep, quiet peace of the Hudson Valley and the monumental legacy you left behind. Think of the simple idea that took root in a lonely child's heart, that the suffering of others matters, that it is our business, that we have a responsibility to see it and to act. An idea that grew, nurtured by heartbreak and duty, until it was strong enough to shape national policy, to comfort a world at war, and to give voice to a universal declaration of human rights. Let the story of that long, remarkable journey be a gentle companion now, as you begin to drift. Let the noise of your own day fade away, replaced by the soft, steady hum of history. There is nothing more for you to do now, nothing but to rest, to let go, and to ease into the quiet of the night. The story is over, but the compassion it championed continues to echo, a soft and gentle whisper in the heart of the world.